Recording in progress.
How do I get back to it? There we go.
Okay, cool. Okay, welcome back everybody. So we have, unfortunately Yossi, he was supposed to be here and had to go back to Israel because of the situation, the conflict. So he's back in Tel Aviv. Yossi, as you can see, just recently wrote a very important book called The Israeli Century, How the Zionist Revolution Changed History and Reinvented Judaism. It's a very important book that I recommend highly, and it touches on many of the issues that we've been discussing. Yossi Shain is a member of the Israeli Knesset, and he's also a professor of political science. He's a member in the Knesset, in the Israeli Parliament, and the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, and he's the chair of the Subcommittee for Higher Education and the head of the Knesset's delegation for relations with the European Parliament. Before becoming a member of Israel's Knesset, he was the chair of Tel Aviv University's School of Political Science, Government and International Affairs, and the director of the Francis Brody Institute for Applied Diplomacy. And he was also the head of the Abba Eban Graduate Program for Diplomacy. And in Georgetown, he was a full professor, currently emeritus, of comparative government and diaspora politics, and was a founding director of the program of Jewish Civilization at Georgetown, which is a renowned program. So Yossi is really has been a leading scholar, and I don't say these words lightly, I think it's the first time I've actually said it, really a leading scholar and a voice, an important voice in the Knesset on many of the issues that are concern to us here and in Israel and the Jewish people in general. So Yossi, it's really an honor that you're here with us. Thanks for taking the time. I wish you were here, but there's the Jews. We have things to take care of in this condition.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and I'm really glad to be here. And thank you for all the amazing work you're doing on ISGAP over the years. And I'm honored to always be with you. I was supposed to be at Oxford. We spent time at Cambridge. But as you said, I could not stay the entire time, and now I'm here, and I'm also glad that the events in Gaza ended. I can tell you I spent time in the southern part of Israel, and as you mentioned, I'm also a member of the Security and Foreign Relations Committee, the Subcommittee for Intelligence. It was really quite an event we have seen here. Was our response to the GAP, to the Islamic Jihad groups, and this was really, I think, very impressive work that we have done here. But we're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about anti-Semitism and its many faces, which I'm sure you're discussing. And I'm here to put it in perspective via the prism of my book, The Israeli Century. I will speak for about 35 minutes and get questions because at 7:30 Israeli time, I have to go for another thing here as a result of what is happening. So we have an hour or so. The Israeli Century, as I describe it, is a unique moment in Jewish history. Not only 2,000 years of history since the collapse or the downfall of the Second Temple, which we just marked on Tisha B'Av, but also 3,000 years of history since the kingdom of David and Solomon. The more, we know about it, but but certainly since the 8th century, before the Common Era, and later on, of course, after the destruction of the First Temple. It's different in the sense that for the first time in Jewish history, we see its sovereignty and the state of Israel is becoming the most important feature of Jewish life in terms of both the power of the state, in terms of the representation of the state, in terms even of the majority of the Jews soon residing in the state of Israel. Israel has become the epicenter of what is happening worldwide, I'm arguing, and everything, in fact, emanates from the behavior of Israel, the challenges it faces, the evolution of Israel, and also the that we are producing here. All of this reverberates throughout the world. And of course, there is also what I call the process of the Israelization of anti-Semitism in the process. It is not by mistake that much of the discussion, or a lot of the discussion also of anti-Semitism, has been in connection to the state of Israel, its action, the boycott of Israel, the BDS, and all of the above. There is a reason for that, and the reason is that the Israeli century represents a unique moment of Jewish powerfulness. Not powerlessness, but powerfulness. The diaspora and the exilic time of the Jews were, of course, the vast majority of the time of their existence. There were some times of Jewish sovereignty, not similar to what we have now, but somewhat similar. One is, of course, before the collapse of the first temple, before the Jews went into exile to Babylon, and where they have been transformed into Babylon from the seed of Israel to the holy seed. This was a major shift in Jewish history at the time, 587 BC, when the Jews went into exile and there was no government. The government went into exile. The king was no longer a persona which could be holding the loyalties of the people. And therefore, the idea was that the high priest at the time took a center stage. And of course, the prophets took a center stage. Later on, it was the Bible itself, or the reading of the Torah became a center stage. All of this created the Jews not only as a people who were related to a patrimony, to a territory, to nationalism, but also as the holy seed, which enshrined the Jews as giving a gift, so to speak, to humanity of one God who is also conducting history. The innovation of the Jews in exile was they created a God who was inventing history. In the ancient world, we had gods who were gods of people, like Jehovah was the God of the Jews. But the God was protecting the people. The God were kind of like almost the second legitimacy of kings, as it was also in the time of Yossi, before the collapse of the second temple, of the first temple, sorry. But after the collapse of the first temple, God has been elevated not only as a fixture of the people itself, but also someone who is conducting history. Therefore, the idea of Jews going to Galut, to exile, and they will return, as Jeremiah kind of like prophesied, was in fact the hand of God. Ever since, the paradigm of the Jews was exile and return. We are worshiping God, and whenever we are deviating from worshiping God, God has his mysterious way of sending us to exile, rejuvenating ourselves, and eventually he will restore us. In the first temple era, of course, it was after 70 years. In the second temple era, it was after 2,000 years, after the temple collapsed in 70 AD. So this was the paradigm. I maintain that the Israeli century is breaking this paradigm. No longer exile is a possibility. Israel is such a fixture in international affairs that if God forbid Israel collapses, calamity perhaps will befall the world. So we are in a different position right now when the exile is a smaller and smaller kind of like, I would say, existence in comparison to the state of Israel. Keep in mind that the state of Israel, when it was created in 1948, when it was declared by David Ben-Gurion, there were only 600,000 people here. Now we're talking about 10 million, among whom about 8 million or so Jews, or those who are Jews but not halachic Jews because of moving from different places and are recognized by the law of return as Jews but not by halakha. This is one of the debates in Israel. In this kind of reality, I make the point in this book, and I make comparisons to lots of things. The state of Israel is becoming the most important feature that informs everything that Judaism is, including religiosity, including culture, including literature. I maintain that you don't know anymore about Jewish literature abroad the way you knew it in America of Philip Roth or Alfred Case and whatever. Now maybe American authors, Jewish American authors, write oftentimes via the prism of Israel. And of course, this is in France, the Israelization of French Jewry, the Israelization of British Jewry, and we already encompass what happened in post-Soviet Russia, etc. So lots of things have happened in this business. The fact that Israel is taking such an important step is defining also a question that we will discuss in 1 second of Jewish morality. No longer to discuss what we call Jewish morality of the liberal world of the diaspora, which is people are talking about universal morality, an idea that many Jewish organizations build themselves around. B'nai Brit, the American Jewish Committee, American Jewish Congress, and many others, but rather realpolitik is at the center of Israel. That is, everything stems from Israel's security needs. We act according to our needs, even if we make the point that we are the more moral army, the most moral army in the world. We still fight wars, and we have to respond to the moral challenges as we do. Now, we had such a period in Jewish history, which I have not mentioned, and I have long chapters in the book about it, during the Maccabi time, during the Hashmona'i time. The Hashmona'i time, from 160 BC, more or less, all the way to the rise of the Romans, and later on Herod and his kingdom. There was a kind of like a kingdom that governed, and when this kingdom governed, and I show it, immediately he took over all the diaspora. And even in times of Herod, when he had like Herod, was not perceived by the Pharaoh side as really Jewish, because during the time of the Hashmona'i kingdom, those who live in the what we call the state of Israel, or at the time the Hashmona'i state, were forced to be converted. This was forceful conversion. Until today, we have an issue of conversion. So Herod himself was a son who was of a father who was converted forcefully, and therefore there was kind of always suspicion how Jewish he is. And the Pharisee priest did not believe in him. What he did in order to offset them, he brought priests from the diaspora, from Alexandria and other places, because they would imagine that Israel is bringing Reformed Jews to be at the head of the Rabbanut in Israel, in the Rabbanai. It's exactly like that. So this is something which I compare to see how sovereignty is taking place. When the sovereignty is taking place and the Jewish existence is becoming in such a manner sovereign-oriented, the paradigm of exile and return is being debunked. Jewish memory is being renegotiated. Because the entire story of the Jewish memory, until of course even including Tisha B'Av, the calamity that befell on the Jews all the way to the Holocaust, was related to this kind of relations with God, to this kind of relations of God's punishment, of banishing the Jews from their homeland. This idea of Jews being banished from the homeland also created, in many ways, the theology of Christianity. Don't forget that Christianity was created under the pretext that there was the seed of Israel, or the flesh of the Jews was transformed to the entire universe. And the Jews were reincarnated in Christianity, which became a universal creed. The Jews, under Augustine, as he said, remains just a memory of how Christianity was evolved, and therefore the dictum of the church at the time, since the 4th century, was al tergu, don't kill them. Don't kill them because they are memory. They are remnants of what has been in the past. This issue of anti-Semitism of the church was so seminal throughout the ancient world after the collapse of the Second Temple and the Christianity. It was also becoming more and more important after the collapse of the short-lived sovereignty of the Jews during the Bar Kokhba time from 131 to 135 AD, when the Jews managed somehow to reconstruct a short-term sovereignty and defeating almost the mighty Romans. But this was the period that sovereignty was constructed. All of these periods I'm talking about have basically informed David Ben Gurion's thinking about exile and return, and in all his writings, he's comparing the Jews as reconstructing their ancient sovereignty and ancient nationalism. In fact, Ben Gurion himself almost avoided completely all the halachic Jews and their history, and the diaspora, 2,000 years of halachic Jewish history, because in his words, this was anti-historical existence. For the Jews who are the Zionists, who are building the state of Israel, the religiosity and the sense that religion compensates for the lack of sovereignty and perhaps replaces it is unacceptable, and the Zionists were talking about a modern nation state. Keep in mind that the Christian church could not agree with the Zionists. And when Herzl goes to Pius X, the Pope, and asks him to recognize an entity called the new modern state of Israel, whatever he meant at the time, the Pope said, we cannot, you have betrayed our Messiah, you betrayed Jesus. Imagine that in 2014, when the current Pope is visiting Israel, he comes and he lays a wreath on Herzl's tomb. When I go to the Council of Bishops in Washington, when I speak to Father McManus, he tells me this perception of the church, that the Jews are now entitled to sovereignty, is the mightiest transformation of Christianity since the time of the Reformation in 15 or 16 AD. Quite remarkable. So the Israeli century is certainly a mighty, mighty change in Jewish history, and it also changes the discussion on anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, which was always in the minds of the Zionists, the disease of the diaspora, because the lack of sovereignty brought all this calamity on them. First, it was the calamity was brought by Christianity and the church. Later on, it was brought on them by the designation of the Jews as people who are not ready for modern way of life, and therefore kind of debunked for being dealing with all kind of economics that is not the modern economics. Secondly, because they were still remaining religious and they were out and out, cannot be citizens until the emancipation. And even later on, of course, racial anti-Semitism that developed all the way into the Holocaust. All of this was the anti-Semitism of the diaspora. And Zionists had it that once we have a state, all this Zionism, all this anti-Semitism will dissipate because they will not hate us. And if they hate us, we still can kill them. That's what we do right now, knock on wood. That's what they say. Look at this. They still hate us, the Islamic jihadists. They still hate us, Hamas. They still hate us, the Hezbollah and the Iranians. But we take our fortune in our hands. No longer we are victims of this. The victimhood of the diaspora is different than the way we experience. All of this also, I will stop here because I feel I speak too fast. So I will slow down. You know, speaking to a computer is not always the same as standing on stage. But what I'm saying is, this is created an avalanche of moral dilemmas of the Jewish state, and of course the relations between Jews and the diaspora, on who is speaking for the Jews, who speaks for the Jews, with what authority, and who listens. And this is a big question I deal with in the book, because historically speaking, the diasporic leadership spoke for the Jews. Nowadays, you can look around and say, who speaks for the Jews in the diaspora? Do you have any role models of the diaspora that have any power? Do you have any organization that have any power? Maybe after Elie Wiesel's death, there was no one even to speak about the Holocaust as a spokesman of the diaspora. There was kind of a division of labor at the time when American Jews spoke on certain issues, and Israel could not speak. But even then, you don't find any more characters in America of greatest, even rabbinical leaders, like you had in America, Rabbi Heschel or Rabbi Kaplan, who were kind of leading the new streams of Judaism, Dorothy or Soloveitchik. Everything emanates now from Jerusalem. I'll give you an example. When I speak to Rabbi Mervis in England, you're in it, and Rabbi Mervis, the chief rabbi of England, will tell me that today all the rabbis in England are being taught and ordained in Jerusalem. Only 50 years ago, all of them were ordained and taught in England. This is a mega shift also in terms of religiosity. Who dictates what religion is? And this is a big culture war that we have in Israel. All of this informs also the subject of anti-Semitism as we see it. It doesn't mean that people do not hate the Jews if it's on the right, or people despise the Jews on their left. Oftentimes, the left kind of despise the Jews like in Durban or talking in the progressive because of Israel's deeds. Even though the liberal Jews are not so connected perhaps in their mindset about Israel, but the Israeli did. And indeed, the idea of Israeli morality, which shifted over time from the universal morality that the Jews were trying to contend with against anti-Semitism. When the Jews came to America after the pogroms in Russia, because remember, until the early part of the 20th century, the vast majority of all Jewry, up to 7 million, lived behind the pale in the Russian Empire. But very quickly, after 1882 and so on, the problems, America became the destiny. America became the golden Medina, the golden state. It could provide shelter, it could provide shelter from anti-Semitism, it could provide freedom, and it could provide complete incorporation as the melting pot. The idea of the melting pot, people forget, was conceived by one of Zionists' architects in the past. The one who wrote the play, the melting pot, was Israelization, for those of you who don't know, and that played in Broadway. So it's interesting that the Jews thought, okay, we find a solution in the Golden Medina. Israel, of course, countered the America. And I called my book The Israeli Century against the idea that the American Jewry is supreme to sovereign Jewry, as it was presented in another very important book, I think, by Slaskin, called The Jewish Century. That's why I call mine The Israeli Century. When anti-Semitism started to develop in light of Israel's existence, it had many, and I write about them, many kind of like, I would say, twists and turns. First of all, in the old Soviet Union, later on the issue of immigration from other places with the Gaul and others. The idea that a powerful nation has been created was almost antithetical to the idea of exilic or diasporic Jews who are until now in America, the liberal creed at least, is tikkun olam, sort of amending the world, not particular, and I would call it tribal kinship ties. When Israel is now created and kinship ties are defined by the state, we deal with two types of anti-Semitism. One is the Israeli-oriented, which is oftentimes associated with the left, not with the right, but even though there was some on the right. And the traditional anti-Semitism, which comes on the right, which is nationalist, the Jews are disloyal, which is sometimes those who are anti-capitalists, which are saying the Jews are controlling money in the world, etc., 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 all of the discussions you do. My book shows that this transformation is interesting enough also for the behavior of the state of Israel and world Jewry in terms of the division of labor. Many times the Jewish organization took the fight against anti-Semitism while Israel stayed behind the scene because Israel said we have to deal with realpolitik. When Israel had relation with South Africa, when South Africa was still an apartheid state, many of the Jews in America were leery about it, telling us, how could you do that? And we said, you know, this is a friend. When Israel is having a friend in the Middle East and dealing with them, sometimes America was boycotting Sisi because they saw Sisi not democratic, and Israel said, you know, we have realpolitik to deal with. Or the same question comes with the territories, with the question of Judea and Samaria, and so on. There is a big issue here, how to deal with it. Today, and this is how the work of many of you, including you and ISGAP, is that the point is that people understand there is a nexus here, there is a connection here between the state of Israel and anti-Semitism, almost inseparable. Those who are trying to demean Israel can always use kind of like past ideas of showing why the Jews are either too powerful, too nasty, too treacherous, whatever it is, and also blaming American Jewry for supporting them and therefore not completely committed to the liberal creed. We fight it, even though the Israelis are not so much understanding or grasping or even dealing with anti-Semitism. Because for many Israelis, anti-Semitism will work itself out because of realpolitik or bilateral relations. When A. Foxman came to Begin, A. Foxman, from the head of the ADL, and told him that we have to stop this anti-Semitism series in Egypt after the accords, the peace accords with Egypt in the early 1981. Begin said, no, leave it aside because if it will work itself out. This is bilateral relations. Israelis do not deal with anti-Semitism, but more and more we understand also, and the official Israel understanding, because of the supremacy of the state of Israel on all other Jewry. And when I say it, I don't mean it in a triumphant sense, just as a matter of fact. So many more in Israel are now becoming more and more, I would say, preoccupied with it, understanding they cannot ignore it when it happened in other places, be it in Germany, France, England, or the United States. Albeit, there are many Israelis still, especially on the right, who are saying, just suffer anti-Semitism. We told them, come to Israel and you will not suffer. That's what they're saying. We told you, just come over here. It's clear. Life in the diaspora and exiles are not secure. Only in the state of Israel are secure. So this is the debate, the moral debate that we are having here. And I think it's important for you to discuss it, how this evolved. I describe all of this in my book, which is a long book, and I think worth reading. I'm delighted it was chosen by the President of Israel as the most important book of our generation. And I'm absolutely honored by that. And I think you see this grasp about the sovereignty and the diaspora on the issue of anti-Semitism. And I think, Charles, I'll stop here and I take questions. I think much more important, I'll continue in my barrage of words.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, Yossi.
I wish I could see you all.
I know.
Yes.
As always, thank you. I can turn this around. Does anybody... Somebody want to... You want to come here to ask some questions? Anybody have a question or comment? You may want to go the other way around. Oy vavoy.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Shalom, Yossi. Hello. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time and for your inspiring talk. And my name is Noah, and I'm from Israel. And I would like to use this opportunity to ask you this kind of double question, please. So you're a professor in political science and international relations, and you are a very accomplished academic with admirable contribution to institutions both in Israel and abroad. And now you are a politician. And I would like to ask you if you would like to share some insights with us on how it's like to work and to act within the environment that you have lectured and you've studied on. And then my second question, which I hope is, related, would be...
The first question, I couldn't hear the first question clearly.
Yes. Would you like to share with us the experience you've had while working, acting, and experiencing the environment that you are an academic expert on? Would you like to answer that, or should I ask the next one as well?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
The second question?
My second question would be that as a politician, you must know that in the end, akol ba'ishī ve'baregshī. So as an expert, what would you say, how efficient is then rationality in advocating against anti-Semitism and for Zionism? And what is the role of logic and facts in these arguments?
What?
Can you hear me?
What is the
Repeat yourself.
Okay, sorry. What is the role of logic?
What is the role of what?
Of logic, rationality, and facts, and how do we use it in our favor? And do you think that people who advocate for Israel and for Jews today are using the tools that they have at their disposal correctly? I hope my questions are clear. Thank you.
I will answer the second question first, and I will remind you that in the 19th
Thanks, Noah.
prior to Herzl, there was a brilliant man in Europe named Moshe Hess, who wrote from Rome to Jerusalem, where he basically made the point that anyone who is espousing nationalism in Europe at the time, after the spring of nations and so on, denying the right of the Jews to have their own nation, even though they exhibit all the tenets of nationalism, is absolutely anti-Semitic. That's how he wrote it against the Germans. And he also attacked Reform Judaism in his amazing essay, which I deal at length with Moshe Hess. But in addition to that, because Reform Judaism was all about that Judaism is not nationalism. Judaism is only about religious belief in a different, and not an halachic orientation. And this became a big sense of controversy that eventually moved into the American arena. And after the State of Israel was created, of course, there were other developments which I will not discuss. The first question you have asked, it was about logic, right? If I may, if this was the case,
Yeah.
or about is this the case? That
Yes.
She was asking about logic. How do you
Yes.
answer?
Rationality.
Logic and rationality.
Look, logic and rationality in our world, of course, is in short supply because the debate about truth, especially wokeism in America, the debate about who speaks and what, and to what extent the voices are marred with all kind of ideas is a very difficult thing. I'm not talking about cognitive dissonance in a post-Marxian word, but what I will say is always try to make the point, in my opinion. Israel is a country which was created by the Jews in order to protect Jewish life that could not be protected in the diaspora. And that was Zionism's idea from Herzl on and even before, from emancipation, from Pitzker on. The idea was that those who are debunking Israel, saying, you're an outpost of colonialism, you are this or that. First of all, remember, the United Nations declared two states. One was a Jewish state. They didn't say, they said the Jewish state. Those who said it's not a Jewish state, it's undemocratic. Remember, this was the United Nations. And an Arab state. Secondly, we accepted it. They did not. And more and more, of course, created a beacon of a democratic nation. It's not just like verbosity or rhetoric. We have created, there are lots of issues, outstanding issues, including many, many members of the Knesset who are Arabs, who of course part of the state but not part of the nation. And we have a huge debate on the national law, who belongs to the nation and who belongs to the state, like many other nations which define themselves based on kinship ties. So there are lots of issues to be reckoned with. And those who always say, it's about the territories, always remind them when the gap, the Islamic jihadists, or Hamas, or even Abu Mazen for that matter, or even, of course, the Hezbollah in Iran want to destroy us, it's not about the 67 borders, it's about 48 borders. The very existence of the State of Israel is perceived by them as antithetical to their theory. And yet, remember that many, and perhaps most of Arab states now accept us. We have peace in the region, and this is a milestone that we have come because of our powerfulness and the lack of powerlessness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shain. It's refreshing to see that you did not divorce the history of Israel as a Jewish state from the history of the Jews in the past. Because most Israeli Zionist professors or Zionist academia or even politicians, they kind of completely divorce Jewish history and the state of Israel. And to them, Zionism started with Herzl. They forget, first of all, as a Mizrahi Jew, I have to say they forget that prior to Herzl, it was Rabbi Yehuda de Vivas and Rabbi Yehuda Al-Kalai who spoke about a modern state of, a Jewish state of Israel. Secondly, Herzl's original, his quest was not to establish a Jewish state. His quest was to find a solution to the Jewish problem. And his first... Jewish question. And the first solution, if I remember well, I wasn't alive then, but I read plenty about it, was to convert the Jews. And that would have solved the issues of Uganda or Nebraska or whatever it is. So how can we teach now Zionism in the state of Israel? And I had that conversation with several Israeli ministers of education and politicians. When I tell them that they need to begin teaching Zionism from Avraham Avinu, from Abraham, they look at me as I am from Mars. They say, oh, that's religion, or that's an old book. That's not Zionism. Zionism, it's Herzl. And in my view, it's completely erroneous, because it gives חרב לאויבינו להורגנו, because when Mahmoud Abbas stands on the United Nations General Assembly and says, if you Jews were persecuted in Europe, right, what is our fault that you come and you take our land? Because Israel for decades has been justifying the state of Israel by saying it's a safe haven from the Holocaust or from European Jewish persecution. But if they come and say, no, that's not the reason. The reason is because we were promised that land, because there was a two Jewish commonwealth that lasted over almost 1,200 years, so on and so forth. So how can we change that attitude, even by Israeli politicians, Israeli academicians? That's question one. Question two will be much, much shorter.
I think we should stop at this question because it's too long, and otherwise we will go more into the question and we answer this.
Yeah, okay.
Two things I would like to say. First of all, indeed, I take you to a journey of 3,000 years, as I said. And 3,000 years is just to remind you back and forth of that, of what has happened and what were the losses. One should not, however, underestimate that after the collapse of the Second Temple, even though there were those who still remnants who desired the return of the Jews from exile and build a patrimony, and of course the calamity that befell the Jews after the Bar Kokhba revolt, the vast majority of Jews were adopting halakha as a replacement of sovereignty. Rabbi after rabbi made the point that sovereignty is messianic.
I don't think it was replacement of sovereignty. It was a way. Yeah, but that's wrong to say. It's not a replacement of sovereignty. It was a way to maintain the identity of the Jewish people, so they will not assimilate. It was not a sovereignty replacement.
It's not by mistake that the ultra-Orthodox objected to Zionism because they thought it was predating the Messianic return, and the experience of false Messiah was also a detachment. And it is not by mistake that they were not keen on moving to Palestine to create a state, even though there was an all community of rabbis here. They were rather feeling that modern nationalism is not a solution. Modernity is an obstruction of the return of the Messianic power. One thing we have to be careful about. It is true that there were also Alkali and other rabbis who were speaking about Alevi, and I write all about them. There were remnants, and I write chapters and chapters about these courageous people who spoke in the Kuzari, etc., about returning. But the vast majority of halachic Jews, especially in the period of settlement, were seeing Zionism, or were seeing the return to Zion, as an obstruction of history and not conducted by God as it should be.
Only in the 20th century. Only in the 20th century and maybe late 19th century.
In the 19th century, in the 18th century, all the way to only the 16th century. I had the book is a long book. I wrote 7 years of the book and checked all these rabbis. I'm not pleading with you to accept my thesis, or I'm not making a political point. That's why I'm a historian and I write this book. This debate, you have to read it. I don't have enough time because I have to go at 7:30 my time. What I'm saying is, it's not by mistake that the Knesset had Herzl on the wall, and it's not by mistake that everybody recognized Herzl, right or left, except, of course, from the ultra-Orthodox and some zealot religious Zionists who considered that Zionism began with religious outposts and not secular. It was developed in Europe, and Herzl was never asking for conversion. On the contrary, anyone who read his diaries, as I did, but a year and a half, day in, day out, to see everything he said and everything done, envisioning this as a modern nation state. And therefore, he also had a division of labor in the state. When he was speaking about the rabbis will be in one place and the state itself will be. Until today we have, and I write about it, the biggest struggle of Israel into the future is between modernity and those who are still thinking that the Messianic version of Israel should be here. I sit in the Knesset. I sit with members of Agudat Israel and some who tell me we are anti-Zionist, as he said, because we think that Zionism is Jews living in the state of Israel but do not hold power, and this is why they don't go to the army, because it's not the army who protects us, but God who is protecting us. This is a huge debate, we'll not go into it, but Zionism undoubtedly, modern Zionism, with the idea that the Jews will protect themselves, changed in Israel too. Israel has moved to become much more traditional, adopting all those who were forgotten on the way, as I reminded them about their powerfulness. And the political struggle in Israel is also informing Zionism. For example, Smotrich in the parliament wants to go and cancel the law of return that allow every Jew who is a mother Jewish or not Jewish to come to Israel. Keep in mind, as Rabbi Lichtenstein said, Jews were first and foremost the seed of Israel. That is, kinship ties were always much more important than religiosity for the Jews. They were a clan before they were religious. And so this is another question to be asked, but this is not the time to discuss it, I'm sure. And one thing that I regret is that I'm not with you, because then we could go into all-night discussion with this is my passion, as you can imagine, but I have to confine myself to a few seconds. So I appreciate it. The fact that I'm answering so quickly is not that I don't want to hear you, but I just want to hear others before I have to go in another 14 minutes.
Very good, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Shalom Yossi.
Shalom Uvacha.
Shalom. I'm Harry. Nice to meet you. Yossi, I just have two questions for you, and I'm going to be brief. My question. Baruch Hashem. My question to you is, you mentioned Moses Hess and his work Rome and Jerusalem, and one of the points Hess makes in this work left me feeling rather intellectually confused when it comes to Zionism, because of course Hess in this work said, and I quote, "Jewish noses cannot be reformed, nor black Jewish curly hair can be turned through baptism or coming into smooth hair." Now clearly this is an anti-Semitic idea, but it reflects within Zionist thinking, it seems that actually many Zionists use anti-Semitic ideas about Jewish fragility, Jewish weakness, and particularly the concept of Muskel, Judentum, Jewry of muscle, to support this idea of Jewish nationhood. So I wonder if you could speak to that, and very quickly, the fragility. You spoke about the democratic beacon, Israel being a democratic beacon, but isn't it the case that ultimately Israel is contingent upon a Jewish majority, and that very notion is a fragile one? Israel is that concept of having a Jewish majority is fragile, and therefore if a situation were to come to pass where Israel's Jewish majority would be threatened, that democratic beacon would cease to exist.
Let me just, because these are big questions again, when you talk about Moshe Hess and others, it is clear cut that over the years, and especially throughout modernity, I would say, and I point out from the time of the Reformation on, and I talk about England and what happened in England, and England was a very important feature of Jewry, was that many Jews have internalized the criticism of the outside world and adopted the same stigmatization of themselves as others did about the way of work, the way of dressing, the way of whatever you want. It's clear. And this was part of the criticism, that we have to be like the rest of the people. Remember, there are three things about Judaism always have been. One is people like all other people. The other is people who dwell alone. And the third is what we say, light into the goyim, light into the nations. And Israel is always living with these three tenets in conflict, what we should do. So this is one thing. With regard to the second question that you have about Israel's majority, it is clear that because we are a Jewish and democratic state, we must define our rights and in the Knesset in terms of voting. That's why when I speak in the Knesset, I always say there are two concepts in Israel of the Am Israel, the people of Israel. One is Am Israel, who sits next to the table in Passover. We all sit next to the table in Passover. But even Obama was sitting next to the table in Passover, and he talks about Tikkun Olam. But I'm not talking about it. The people of Israel who are coalescing around, and then the people of Israel are those who are voting. People of Israel determining who's, and we have a big question, in this coalition with Mansour Abbas and with other, how much we can bring Arab Israelis to be part of the nation, or they are only part of the state. They are inside the state, but outside the nation, while the diaspora is outside the state, but inside the nation. I write about all this is that, of course, an unresolved issue, and the tension always exists, and you're absolutely correct. If Israel's majority would be Arabs or otherwise, the question of the legitimacy will be just as it happened in Kosovo. Remember, when the Kosovo is the beacon of Serbian nationalism, but when Kosovo becomes 90% Kosovo Albanians, they made a claim. The claim of self-determination is not always coinciding with the ancient claims of entitlement. And this is also part of the discussion, but again, as I said, the only thing I regret today is that I'm not with you, believe me, because finally I have people not in the parliament to talk to, but with scholars and others that I really wanted to share these ideas with, and I have to do it so quickly. So Charles,
We'll come to you.
Bring all these people again. Yes.
So, Yossi, one quick question, literally. It's a quick question. What is the role of Israel in responding to global anti-Semitism and defending the Jews in the diaspora?
I think Israel is gaining a much more important role over the years because of what I say, the Israeli century. If in the past Israel has ignored it or even evaded it, and it was very much, condemned because of that, including all the recovery of Jewish money from the Swiss, all of the story that I write about. Nowadays, when there is no one else speaking on behalf of the Jews, when the American Jewish Congress is perhaps, or American Jewish Committee, the mighty David Harris and so on, but this is not enough. So Israel must have a say, and secondly, because of what I said, because everything is entangled. When the embassy in Argentina is being bombed, or the Jewish center, Amia, is being bombed, it doesn't matter if Hezbollah is doing it because they hate Jews or they hate Israel. We know that we're in the same boat. And the idea of Kol Israel Arevim Ze Lazeh, that all the people of Israel are responsible for each other, is becoming much more pronounced in Israel, in the government, and I'm a huge advocate of that. Keep in mind that Israel also created in the Penal Code, Penal Code number 13, that Israel is responsible for the well-being of all the Jews wherever they may be if they're attacked before they're Jews. So definitely we have a role, and definitely Israeli leadership should take much more account of the well-being of the diaspora, as they do, but not enough in my opinion.
Well, thank God you're in the Knesset, because we need that voice there. You better be re-elected. I hope you'll be re-elected soon.
We will see.
Okay, so I guess we'll.
More questions? I have 5 more minutes.
Cool. Gabby had a question. 1 second. Thank you, Yossi.
Hi, Yossi, Gabi Bram here. Nice to see you. We fought BDS together back in 2015. Nice to see you. I'm well. You're doing great. It's so.
I haven't seen you for ages since we were defending Israel on campuses in England.
Absolutely right. So we keep on going with our work, and I wonder if you can help me to understand a little more your concern about American Jews. No one speaks for the Jews in America because we're so divided and disconnected and assimilated. Thank God we have Israel, but in Israel too we have elections every 5 minutes, it seems. Who speaks for the Jews in Israel? I mean, Jews are divided and we're complicated. Who speaks for the Jews in America is a good question, but really, in Israel, can you say someone speaks for the Jews?
In the end of the day, you're right that we have a huge Kulturkampf, which is often developing in Israel, almost so people see almost a civil war. We see this debate endlessly. We see this idea of who speaks for the Jews, modernity versus antiquity, the religionists, the right and the left. And at the same time, we also know when the fighting is going, everybody is united because we have a common enemy. What will happen when we not have a common enemy, we don't know. But you're absolutely right. The inter-debates among the Jews has not ended, but we still have a state, we still have foreign ministry, we still have the Shin Bet, we still have the Mossad, we still have the IDF, we still have these institutions. But we know some of other institutions, like the courts are being debunked, the Knesset oftentimes is being debunked, and we see it in many other liberal societies. So our work is cut for us, and we don't know how it will be, but indeed you're absolutely right. And therefore, when I write about the Israeli century, it's not just this glorious picture. My entire long chapters on Israel are showing these huge things that you're talking about.
Well, it's a great book. I hope everyone reads it. Toda rabba, kol hakavod, and I'll see you in Eretz Yisrael sometime soon, I hope. You've got my vote.
Thank you so much. much.
You have my vote.
Hello, Yossi. This is Jonathan Spire speaking. Nice to see you.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
You've been doing an incredible work on Ukraine, I saw.
Thank you. Also, we do our best. So here's my question.
Really remarkable.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Here's my question. Your book, Israeli Century, I think outlines very cogently the way that Israel and Zionism has kind of triumphed over many other attempts or versions of Jewish identity in modernity, and that in a sense Israel has kind of come out on top. My question is the following. Isn't it the case, though, that there is still in the world today one other model for Jewish identity and continuity which is profoundly different or opposed to that of Israel and Zionism, and which has the power of longevity, of reproducing itself? And that, of course, is the world of ultra-Orthodoxy. And do you think that this world of ultra-Orthodoxy still constitutes a genuine alternative paradigm for the Jewish response to modernity, which is profoundly different to Israel's, which is maybe even potentially dangerous to Israel's continued triumph, in the sense that the ultra-Orthodox are in Israel itself as well, are having lots of kids, are powerful and are organized? So isn't it the case that Israeli Century, in spite of the tremendous success of Israel and Zionism, that there is still also another real competitor in the Jewish world for the Jewish future, and that is the ultra-Orthodox?
This is, Jonathan, you know very well, this is a big, huge question. Will ultra-Orthodox will be able to defend the state of Israel if they become a majority? How they will react? I asked this question of Mr. Gafni, and I asked this question of Mr. Ascher and Mr. Porush. And when Mr. Gafni says that Mamlachti and Haredi are targeted as separate, which means that Haredi and Israeli statehood is a negation by nature. I said to him, okay, let's see how you will defend the state when you have to defend. It's easier for them when we defend the state and they sit and study. And we will know that eventually they will not be able to do so. Secondly, there is also an interesting evolution of other sorts of Jewish globalization, including Chabad. Chabad also represents this kind of Chabad house. They send the people all over the world. But we know all this globalization of Jewry is good as long as they are not attacked. When they're attacked in Russia, or when they're attacking India, immediately Israel come to play, and immediately all the world's leaders are talking to Israel and not talking to Chabad leaders, even though because the leader is, of course, the Messiah, Schneerson. So with all due respect to all the other manifestations of Jewry, the leadership, the institutions, the culture, everything stems from the state of Israel, albeit, as I said before, this is constantly being tested by our demography, and you're absolutely right. A 74-year-old ultra-Orthodox man, yes, is going to have 52 on average offsprings. And a 74-year-old secular, whatever it is, 30 man will have only 9. I will end by this. You should congratulate me because last week I became for the first time a grandfather.
Congratulations. Mazal tov.
Mr. Shain, I heard you became a grandfather. I said, yes, I'm delighted. I have a beautiful granddaughter, my first one. He said, first one, how old are you? I said, I'm going to be 66. And he said, I'm 60. But I said, how many do you have? He said, I have 60 grandchildren and I have already grandchildren. And then he said to me, and like this, you want to win elections? I said, yes, correct. And what we will see is how it evolves. But this is, as I write in my book, this is the greatest challenge into the future. But you will have to excuse me, Jonathan. I have to run. I would have loved to stay with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
And I want to say to Charles, and I want to thank all of you for listening. And I'm absolutely honored that you had me, Charles, and
Thanks,
accommodating my time.
Thank you, Yossi. Success and strength in all your important work. And we'll speak soon.
Thank you so much. I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Bye. Take care.
Recording.
Okay. we have a bit of extra time. I have two important announcements, and I want to say there's a bit of a mistake in the printed schedule. It's not in the electronic schedule. The electronic schedule is correct. But in the printed schedule, there's no Friday, August 19th. And Friday, August 19th is a day where you're supposed to present all of your curriculum and projects. It's very important. We have to meet here at 9:30, and it's going to be an intense full day where you're going to present, the professors will present the curriculum for their proposed courses, and these Elie Wiesel, Martin Luther King Fellows will discuss and present their projects. It's very important. There's an announcement too. The other thing is, a small announcement, we would really be grateful if you take your books. We schlepp them. They're heavy, and I know they're heavy for you, but they're wonderful additions for your library. I think they help. So please, if you'd be so kind to take them, and I hope you can use them as well.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Please, eyes on me. Okay? Eyes right here. Yeah. I sent each and every one of you a link to complete a survey. And only 13 people have done the survey. Thank you. You are my favorite now. 13 of you, I enjoy. The rest, until this survey is complete, don't talk to me. Okay? Get these surveys done. We need them to improve the Summer Institute.
Did you send it for today's?
I'm going to be sending it, now that the day's finished, I will be sending it. Thank you for your question. Very appreciated. We need them to make the Summer Institute better. So actually, please do them. Every year, people tell me.
Such conviction.
Every year, people tell us the Summer Institute is getting better and better, and a large part of that is the surveys that you guys complete. So please do your part that you're already doing by being amazing scholars and Wiesel King scholars, and do the survey. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so I don't know, are there any questions or comments about today's session? Or you can finish early if you wish. Early finish? Yeah. 10th day, okay. So have a wonderful evening and feedback on time tomorrow 9:30. We have a very... Yeah, well, there's going to be breakouts, so... At 6? Okay, breakout sessions at 6. Tomorrow... Excuse me. Daphne, can you speak on my behalf, please? So tomorrow we have a very intense and full day. It's going to be a special day with guests from around the world discussing the Abraham Accords. It's going to be a full, long day. So please, we have to start on time at 9:30. So have a wonderful evening and thank you for all your contributions.
Should we just do breakout rooms now?
Sure. Do you want to do breakout rooms now and finish early?
Yeah.
All right. Go for it. Good idea.
Do you want me to talk now or after the breakout? Okay. Yeah, I can go join the And should I just come back here? Or?
Go away so we can break up.
Come back here?
Okay, I'll make sure that I was just going to say after your I was just recommending to people that I'd love to if you give it to me as well. This is my